Welcome back to Founding Footprints, a podcast sponsored by the Virginia 250 Commission in partnership with the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau, the CACVB. The CACVB has also developed thematic itineraries to pair with each episode. To see what they've developed for this episode, check out visitcharlottesville.org. I'm Ben Bernard, historian at the University of Virginia, and for today's episode, I sat down in the studio at WTJU 91.1 with Olivia Brown, the new executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Can we start with your name, title, and org?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Olivia Brown. I'm the executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society.
Do we say ACHS?
You sure can, because it is a mouthful if you don't.
How long have you been in the role?
Not very long. I just started in April, so very, very new to my job as executive director. Very excited to be here, but
April of 25.
Yeah, yes, April of 2025, a.k.a. in the past month from the time of this recording. But I have served on the board prior to that. So I had been on the board for about a year. So I'm familiar with the organization and a lot of the stuff that we've been doing.
So what is the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society?
So it is your local historical society here for the county and the city of Charlottesville. So we cover both county and city information because Charlottesville is one of those fun cities that's incorporated on its own. So it's its own entity other than Albemarle County. We like to think of it as a donut. You got Albemarle County and then inside you have Charlottesville City. And so we cover all sorts of information about the county as a whole. And that also includes sometimes what are now other counties, but were historically Albemarle County. So really a larger part of the Central Virginia region, which at certain times had been a part of Albemarle County.
And so what makes it a historical society? Or what is a historical society?
That's a great question. What do we even do? So we have a couple things that are really our main part of our mission is that history isn't the past, it's the story you tell about the past, right? And how do we do that? We have a building, first of all, which a lot of people don't know. We're located right downtown. We share the block of the central branch of JMRL Library. So we're just one block off of Market Street. And we also have a research library that has tons of resources for anyone to access and a historic collection of artifacts as well. So all of those things go into what we supply by way of content and research for people, and we do programs and things like that to the public that can bring that history forward.
Let's do resources first,
okay,
programs
cool.
second. Resources for the public, are we talking reference books? Are we talking internet databases? What are the types of tools that you see people using?
Yeah, resource books and resource materials, primary and secondary sources. It's really the main thing that we have because it's a reference library. So we don't allow people to check books out and take them home like you would from a regular library. But we get tons of people who are doing genealogy research. We have tons of resources about families from the area dating from various time frames. Property research is a big thing we get. People wanting to know who owned their house or their land or when. And then we have a huge collection of reference books too. So that secondary source material of history books about the area, about people from the area, and things like that contribute to that. We do have some online catalogs, the catalog of the books available in our reading room is hosted through the JMRL Library. And really the best way to see stuff is to check our website, but then also come see us in person because we have a research librarian. We have volunteers who work in our research library and help people who are interested in doing that kind of research or just learning about their local area.
Can you tell me more about the folks who come in for genealogical research in particular? I mean, there may be a sense, I think, for some listeners that this is really something that's of interest to people descended from old Virginia families. Maybe it at times feels like an exclusive club for newcomers to the region. Could you reflect a little bit, I guess, on why the genealogical research is kind of important for the entire Charlottesville community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can even say, as I've been the self-proclaimed family genealogist of my family as the person who's involved in history. So everyone's like, you're going to do it, right? So that happens to a lot of people is that they want to be the keeper of their family's history. And for a lot of people, it's either that they can at some point trace someone to our area, not necessarily that they have to have been someone who's been here for hundreds of years or for a really long time, multi-generational. But we also get calls and inquiries from people out of state who are doing their own research and then find someone in their family tree who at some point crossed paths through Charlottesville and Albemarle. And so then they contact us to see if we might have information about them. We have a great number of vertical files, which is just a collection of various types of resources about families by family name. And some of those also then pair to historic collections that people and family members have donated to the Historical Society, like family letters, family Bibles, and things that we have ones that date back to families, pre-revolution that were in Charlottesville or Albemarle area and various families. We also have resources that can kind of help people doing, it's not always just research of these old Virginia families, but also people who are maybe descendant from enslaved families in the area who are trying to do research or learn more about, plots of land, who owned that plot, and maybe be able to track family members who were enslaved there or indigenous to this area. We have these intersections of those historic collections that can help people, even if they don't have either those deep ties to the area and maybe they are newer here and don't know about those ties, or if they don't know about recorded information, which sometimes is a big difficulty.
You mentioned that different families have different kinds of stories in the region. I'm just struck by how archives are never neutral politically or morally, and that they are also reflecting a little bit the records that were produced over various points in history.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of can't think about Charlottesville's history without talking about race and the history of enslavement and enslaved labor. And so I'm just wondering how the archive is constructed in ways that might reflect that history, or in ways that maybe impact how people go about looking for their family's history. So are the types of records available to people who are descended from enslaved laborers? And it's not a binary, right? Obviously, people have, rich and complex family stories. Do these archives look different in some way? Is that a problem for people doing research?
I think it definitely is a challenge for researchers. And part of that is a little bit what you're saying, right? That it's a matter of what stories at various times in history were the ones that were privileged over others to be recorded and or to be preserved, right? So at different points in history, the people choosing to preserve stories were choosing for various reasons. One of our goals, at least now as an organization, is to reflect on how varied the experiences in our local area are, and that all those stories are important to preserve and keep, and that we want to hear stories from all the different parts of Albemarle County. But that poses a challenge oftentimes for people looking into the past, when, especially for people of color, indigenous people who are descendant from enslaved communities, that at the time those records of their families maybe would have been produced, they were not chosen to be preserved, and or people who didn't have, the ability to write and read their own family records, that those things just simply don't exist often.
So concretely, how do you think, folks interested in their own family story and genealogy can circumvent that problem? Like, concretely, what types of resources are available?
There's
what
a
is
lot,
in the archive?
And I've done some research as well, just through various, historical projects I've worked on. I think one of the most important things, if you're facing a challenge of not having those direct primary sources, is learning how to read between the lines on the sources that were preserved. Because oftentimes, if you dig deep enough, you can find references, right?
Do you have any examples in mind that come to mind? I mean, it's okay if not.
No, I was going to say is that oftentimes, especially like trying to do research on people who were enslaved in Albemarle County, is you're not going to find records from those who were enslaved. But you can find names and information through the wills of their enslavers, things like that. And so those type of records that were recording technically something about John Doe, who was a man who was a planter in Albemarle County, in his will, he may talk about leaving his quote unquote property, which included enslaved people, to his family member or so-and-so. And sometimes that includes names, right? And names then help you track more after that. So it's a lot of reading between the lines, history, especially looking the farther back you go, the more kind of investigative work you have to do to really find some of those stories that had not been privileged at the time to be part of those archives.
Okay, so in this podcast, we're considering the legacy of the Declaration of Independence and the founding era of America in Albemarle County and Charlottesville. Can you tell us about what that moment means to you as the director of a historical society?
Sure. I mean, this area, of course, is really a part of that story for multiple reasons, right? For the reason that we are a local area of people who were experiencing that revolution as it happened, right? Albemarle County was founded 1744, Charlottesville 1762. Both of those years predate 1776, which means that people were living in this area as English colonists. And so what does that mean is that it means that when you do eventually get to 1776, that there are tensions here the same way there were all throughout the 13 colonies of, loyalist versus revolutionary, who wants to stay a part of Great Britain and who doesn't, and for what reasons, and then all of those strifes and tensions that lead to it as an overall, revolutionary experience. But we are also directly linked to things like the Declaration of Independence, because we were clearly the site where Thomas Jefferson chose to have his home and was born. And so that legacy of Jefferson as the author of the Declaration of Independence also brings forward the story of Albemarle and Charlottesville, I think, to the national lens of the 250th.
That's great. So is the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society planning anything big for the 250th?
Yes, and I will say watch the space, only because, as I mentioned, I've only been in this job for about a month. But I'm excited to start getting some really cool things hopefully set up for us to bring by way of programming at the very least, but hopefully highlighting, other parts of our collection that are related to that revolutionary period.
What types of programs?
So we do like to host regular lectures and talks. So there will definitely be some that are related to our local history, local revolutionary ideas, whether that's Jack Jewett's Ride, which many people are in this area are familiar with, of course, or if it's also, stories of there are people who were African-American patriots who were fighting in the American Revolution tied to Albemarle County. And we've done programming on that in the past with local historians, genealogists. And so bringing those stories back forward and in conversation with this idea of how do you commemorate a 250-year anniversary of this period in American history that started, the country itself as an independent nation. So we'll definitely be having some talks and some walking tours, hopefully related to it. We do offer walking tours periodically and programs that people can attend, buy a ticket and come and take the walking tour around downtown, because we're right in the heart of downtown. It's easy to walk around and talk about all that stuff.
That's right. So it sounds like you could fit really well for folks who are interested in thinking about their family's history, the history of the region. So check out the Historical Society, do a little research to see what you can find, take a walking tour.
Yeah, and we're open too, right? We are open 8 to 4 Monday to Friday right now. You can always check our website, albemarlehistory.org is where we post our hours and everything. So if, we have weekend hours, we will post them on there. But our building is open. We have, it's a small building, small but mighty. We like to say it's in the original public library building. It's called the McIntyre Building, that was built as a public library before the library was where the library is now. And so we're open for people to also just stop by. We have a small exhibit space there, so we have things on display. So if you're ever around downtown, you can also just walk in, take a spin around, take a look at it, say hello to us, because we love also just bringing people in, even if it's just for a peek, to see that we have open doors and you can come in them.
So, Olivia, you're new in the role. What is your vision for the Historical Society moving forward?
We've been doing so much great stuff in the past few years, building a lot of community partnerships, really getting our name out there in the local area. And I'm excited to continue doing that work, because I think that, your local history and nonprofit organizations are only as good as working in the community that they are a part of, right? That we want to be partners with other organizations that are also bringing a lot of the same type of work forward. But one of my main goals, the people on the podcast won't know, but I am like 32. That's important only because one of my main goals is to remind people of younger generations that history is also interesting and important and cool to learn about. I had been told countless times by people that it's cool to see a young person interested in history, and it is cool. And so one of my big goals is to start really trying to reach some of our local younger audiences and remind them that the stories of our local area really are relevant to everybody. There's an association with the words historical society anywhere in the country that it just means like the place where all the old stuff is. And it doesn't actually mean a place with like dynamic and engaging material and programming and conversations. And so I want that to be really a part of our vision forward.
Do you have greatest hits at the Historical Society, like your favorite documents there?
I will say I probably don't know them well enough to have my greatest hits yet, since I'm so new to learning all of them. I've gotten to see some really cool stuff so far. We have really cool museum collections as well. So we have like physical artifacts. It's not even that it's cool because it's that old. It's cool because I think it's cool is that we are the holders of the current time capsule that is not to be opened until, I don't remember the year, but the most recent time that I guess either the county government or the city government, I can't remember, got everybody to put stuff in a time capsule, seal it up, and it's living at our building until the time that it's supposed to be open. And I just think that's so cool because the time capsule, any time capsule is literally, right, it's your snapshot of history of the time that it was created. And so we've done that multiple times. And I think we have the older one and now we have the one, and it's like zip tied closed. Like, don't open that. That's the time capsule. No one's allowed to open the time capsule. And I think that's super cool. Like stuff like that you wouldn't expect to be there.
To bring this full circle, what do you think the residents of Charlottesville and Albemarle County in the 1770s would say about where things are today?
I think it would be really fascinating to hear, right? To me, what is one of the biggest changes would be the way that the landscape of our area is different, right? If you think about like historic Court Square, the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society were like 2 blocks from Court Square. And to think about how that was literally the center of Charlottesville, that was where the market was, that's where it was hustle and bustle and it was everybody. But it was also kind of only everybody for like a few days of the month because it would be that busy when court was in session. And for the court where people are coming from all over the place to come to their like one court day in Albemarle County, there's just such a different level of kind of way that the landscape was. It was a lot more centralized, I think, in the 1770s, is that there had to be a place that everybody went to. Now we have more of this sprawl because we have things like cars and roads, and we're not traveling by wagon and horse, and you can actually get places in a normal amount of time. Takes us 45 minutes to get to Richmond, took Jefferson 12 hours, right? Or whatever. But I think that the way that we have expanded what those boundaries of Charlottesville or Albemarle County, what that means to them. And I think what actually is interesting is that Charlottesville has expanded, whereas Albemarle County has actually probably decreased in size. Because back in more of the colonial era, Albemarle County included things like Nelson County. It included what it was Fluvanna and Louisa, because it was basically like Goochland County and Albemarle County. And then they didn't know what was west, so Albemarle County just went west. It was like there was no end boundary for a long time. Whereas like we know of Albemarle County as a specific shape, and that's where you are. And now you're in Nelson, or now you're in Fluvanna, or now you're in Greene, or whatever. But those boundaries have decreased, whereas the actual like vision of what Charlottesville is has expanded. Plus, and you think about the 1770s, the University of Virginia wasn't there yet either.
But given some of these differences between how folks experienced life in the 1700s, what are the issues that you think we should be talking about as a community approaching the 250th?
Yeah, I think that there are, a lot of good questions for us to raise, right? 250 years is a long time, right? We're at a quarter of a millennium of time for our country. And I think it's important to look at what has stayed the same and what has changed and evaluate how we feel about those things, right? I think that coming up on the 250th gives us an opportunity to think about the ideals of liberty, freedom, independence, and what that did or didn't mean for certain groups of people at the time, right? When people in the 1770s, some of them were talking about liberty and independence and we need freedom from Great Britain, but then you have a large segment of the population that is enslaved and not given those same rights. What did their stories look like during the Revolution, right? You have a whole underlying story of the British, military offering freedom to enslaved people who would fight for their cause. And then you have thinking about that landscape too, right? We are on ancestral Monacan land. And so, what is happening for the Monacan nation during this time? Many of them had already pre-revolution been pushed out of their homelands by English colonists coming to this area. So by 1776, it's not as much, head to head. But I think that those stories talking about what does liberty, freedom, independence, whatever word you may want to use, what does it mean to different groups and intersections of people? And how can we talk about all of those stories as we reflect 250 years?
Right. So kind of then and now.
Yeah, I think that's really what's important. And that goes back to the mission of the Historical Society itself. Like, our mission really at its core is history is not the past. It's the story we tell about the past. And so that's then and now, right? That's the thing. That's what it is. It's both of those things tied together.
Olivia Brown, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me today. It was great to meet you, and I'm excited to see what the Historical Society has in store for the coming year.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope folks will come visit us. We are open. Come see us.
My conversation with Olivia got me thinking about the importance of genealogy and property as these two points of contact that the public has with history through her organization. And it also got me thinking about a new history book that historians of early America are pretty excited about. This is by Karen Wolf, the director of the John Carter Brown Library, formerly at William and Mary and the Omohundro Institute. Her new book that came out in July 2025 is called Lineage, Genealogy and the Power of Connection in Early America. Her book shows how practices of 18th century family record keeping shaped early American society, who had which rights, demarcating enslavement from freedom, inheritance patterns, the relationship between the family and the state, and much more. Academic historians are continuing to engage with contemporary and historical practices of genealogy as a practice that connects us to the past and to each other. You can learn more about Olivia's organization at albemarlehistory.org.
Founding Footprints is a VA 250 project. America, made in Virginia. This podcast is a production of the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM. Hosted by Dr. Benjamin Bernard, with sound design by Sage Tanguay, editing by Dana Sun, and music provided by Blue Dot Sessions. If you'd like to explore the history of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, you can find more information at visitcharlottesville.org. Virginia is for history lovers.